It is now my very great pleasure to introduce one of tonight's two speakers, Jensen Huang, who will introduce Dr. Chang. Jensen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, first of all, welcome everyone. When Morris asked me to be the person to interview him, I was thinking about the format and the nature of our conversation, and I thought that it would be particularly special if we just turn it into a conversation. I've had over the last 10 years, I have had many conversations with Morris, and all of them are insightful and valuable to me. And I thought that it would be quite remarkable for all of us to be able to talk to Morris as if it's just one of the conversations I've had with Morris over the years. We've through the course of the last several years, and also certainly last night, have learned a lot about Morris's history and his childhood and his journey in his career. I thought that what we should do tonight is to spend the time talking about his taking the story past his life, but be now focused on the work of his life. And so to frame it, let me first, instead of introducing Morris, I'm going to introduce his work. Notice how quickly when John told my life story, and he was comprehensive. Notice how short and concise it was. I don't think he left out any details. There's nothing left. To describe Morris's life work is an extraordinary endeavor. But let me just read a few things to you guys, just to frame Morris's life work. Morris, of course, as we know, is recognized around the world as the father of the dedicated semiconductor foundry. He founded TSMC in 1987 at the young age of 55. He created the world's first pure-play foundry with $220 million of investment from the Taiwanese government and Philips. He spun TSMC out of ITRI and formed TSMC. 10 years later, he took the company public, took it public on the New York Stock Exchange in 1997 with a market cap of $6 billion. Okay, now just $220 million in 1987, $6 billion in 1997. Now he grew the company 43% compounded annual growth rate over the course of that 20 years till today. And today TSMC has revenues of about $10 billion. A market cap of nearly $60 billion. The second most valuable semiconductor company in the world, with the second to only Intel. And the most valuable company in Taiwan. The most valuable company in all of Taiwan. And that really only begins to describe the impact or the value or the strategic importance that TSMC really serves. TSMC has also enabled what's far more important, and what he was recognized for yesterday, enabled an industry of $50 billion large on top of it. Morris describes TSMC as having created a sub-industry enabling an industry called the fabless semiconductor industry, which today has revenues of $50 billion. So if you think about the overall value that has been created as a result of the founding of TSMC in the last 20 years, and if we simply use the multiple, say 4x multiple, for that $50 billion worth of semiconductor companies of which Nvidia is part of, $250 billion of shareholder value was created in the last 20 years. $250 billion. The evidence of a great company, of course, is not just in the creation, certainly, of strategic importance and also wealth, but also indication of greatness is the ability for the company to continue to flourish and be successful as the founder and the original president passes on the leadership to the next generation. In 2005, Morris passed the CEO and president responsibilities to Rick Tsai, who's doing a fabulous job, and TSMC has continued to grow. And if all of that is not enough, Morris is a world-class bridge player. And you know, I think it was in one of our conversations, I noted that Warren Buffett and Bill Gates were also bridge players, and Morris expressed some interest to play them, and in fact, quite a bit of confidence that he would prevail. And so that in a nutshell is TSMC. Unbelievable body of work and unbelievable impact on the world. And so tonight, Morris, I thought what we would do is we would talk about how did you do it? And so with that, I have no other questions. First of all, welcome. So let me break it down a bit. So you know, Morris, both of us, we were founders of our companies, and we think about building products, but not only that, we think about building companies. And in the process of building companies, we go through several phases. As I think through the history of Nvidia, of which you were involved in many of the phases of my company, you know, as you think through TSMC, what were the phases, distinct phases that you could remember, and how do you think through them?
Yeah, the first phase, of course, was just survival phase. We started a company with a lot of money, $220 million back in 1985, 86 was considered to be a lot of money. Well, it's a lot of money even now, I think. And particularly in Taiwan. In Taiwan, it was very difficult to raise that much money. As Jensen said, the government funded about half of it, 48% actually, of the $220 million. And Philips pitched in with another 27%, and the rest, about 25%, was from a dozen Taiwan investors. But anyway, $220 million total was a lot of money, and I was really, the first priority was to protect that money, you know, shouldn't all be should all go to a drain. I can't afford to lose money. So the first phase was survival, but I had a lot of experience, operating experience, before founding TSMC. So I had decided what the values of the company should be, and those values, I think, were very important to us. Not only in the first phase, but from there on, and we have maintained them. We have actually followed them. They are our compass, really. The values are pretty simple. At first, there were just three. Integrity was number one. Commitment. We really wanted the employees to be totally committed to TSMC, but in return, the company is committed to the employees too. And also, commitment applies to customers. We want the customers to be committed to TSMC, but we in return are totally committed to customers. So that's integrity is pretty simple, self-explanatory. Commitment works between employees and the company, and between customers and the company. And then the third one is innovation. We knew that we couldn't compete at all without constantly innovating. So those were our three values. And then we also had a vision. The vision changed. Values don't change. The three values that we had at the beginning are still values today.
And in fact, the first time I went to visit you in Taiwan, instead of a presentation about all the capabilities of TSMC, you gave me a brochure of the core values of TSMC.
That's right. That's right. And I do the same thing with a lot of visitors, with every customer, every potential customer. In the last 10, 15 years, we, as you pointed out, we have been the most valuable company in Taiwan. So we have attracted a lot of public attention too. Political candidates usually, before they started campaigning, would call on me. So the presidential candidate came, and he told me all his big vision about Taiwan, and I handed him our values: integrity, commitment, and innovation. Yeah, presidential candidates from both parties. And in fact, I thought that I detected in each of them a little surprise, you know. I mean, they got this, they don't know what to do with it. But look, every company, you know, goes through phases. First is the survival phase, and then there is the rapid growth phase. Now, when did you guys get traction? When did you guys get business traction, and you started to feel like, you know what, somebody's going to buy this? Well, that didn't happen because I guess we were too expensive. I think. I mean, even at the beginning. Well, at the beginning, of course, nobody. Nothing's changed. Huh? I'm just. Yeah. Nobody even wanted. You walked into that, Morris. You walked right into that. Yeah. I didn't push you. You walked right into it. Nobody even wanted to invest in us. We were really considered to be not very hopeful. And that was the first 2 or 3 years, I think. At least, I would say from '87. We started in February of '87. And 87, 88, 89, 90, I would say 4 years. 4 years were, it was touch and go, you know. It was, but what really started, what really gave us a big start was this rapid emergence of the fabless industry. Companies like yours, of course, yours came up. I'm practically the last fabless company. Nvidia, yeah, Nvidia, of course, rose pretty late in the game. You rose in the middle '90s, but there were several that started to rise in the early '90s. And so those fabless companies really accelerated our growth. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we helped them. Actually, they wouldn't even have started if we weren't around, mm-hmm. if we hadn't been around. They knew. In fact, when Nvidia started in 1993, there was no available foundry in the world. No. In fact, we were there, but you didn't consider us to be. I did consider you. You just didn't call me back. we now let it go on record that I tried to call Morris. I just didn't get a phone call back. Really? In '93? I called somebody in the local office. I don't want to throw anybody under the bridge here, but I didn't get a call back.
Maybe I called the wrong number, but.
But in 96 was different, right?
Oh, 96, yeah, 96 was completely different. And don't try to change the topic, but so so by 1996, 97, TSMC was about $1 billion already.
Yes.
Right, and you clearly, I would guess in looking at the market cap, you were probably a $1.5 billion company when you took the company public.
Well, actually, when we went IPO in Taiwan, which was 94, we had a market cap of $4 billion. And then you pointed out that in 97, when we went public in New York, we had a market cap of about $6 billion.
Now, at the time, in 1997, when you and I met, Nvidia was completed that year with $27 million in revenues. And we had 100 people.
Yeah.
And then we met, and it is you guys probably don't believe this, but Morris used to make sales calls. You used to make house calls, right? And you would come and visit customers, and I would explain to Morris what it is that Nvidia did, and you know, I would explain how big our die size needed to be, and that every year was going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you would come back to Nvidia periodically to make me tell the story over again, just to make sure that I'm going to need that many wafers. And next year we started working with TSMC. Nvidia did I think it was 127. Yeah. And then from that point forward, we grew nearly 100% per year until now. I mean, our compounded annual growth rate over the last 10 years was 70 some odd percent. Yeah. And so not once, okay, maybe 5 times did capacity get in the way of my growth. 4 times last week. But
honestly,
you
know, all through the 90s, and even now, really the biggest joy I get out of this job, CEO or chairman of TSMC, the biggest pleasure I got out of it was to see my customers grow and make money and succeed.
You know, I really believe that, and I honestly feel that every time we get together. You know, I could tell that you feel so strongly about your customers. This is a story that I'm sure he doesn't appreciate me telling, but this is must have been 6-7 years ago, and it was on a Friday afternoon, and you called and you asked if you could drop by to see me, and so I thought, okay, well, yeah, sure, you could drop by anytime, and I was expecting, you know, all of the TSMC sales guys that I usually see, and Panway and Ron Norris and all those guys to show up, and no, you were all by yourself on a Friday afternoon, and you just wanted to talk about business and see how things were going, and how many wafers you needed, and you would always write that down in that black book, and it would always make me nervous, and I would check my CEO math and make sure that I gave you the right number. And so you would write it all down, and Morris, you know, credit where credit is due. I was right 100% of the time, and it turns out I found out several years later it was his honeymoon. Yep. Sophie, I don't know what it says that he wanted to see me more. Well, we've always been close, Morris, and so, but that's he honestly loved working with his customers, and so let's come back to so in the starting about 94, 95 timeframe, clearly TSMC gained traction. And it was about that time that other companies started to notice TSMC's growth, and other foundries were starting to emerge.
Competition, yes.
Right, competition were starting to emerge. Yeah. And one of the strategies that I recall because you were completely pure play. And Toshiba or Fujitsu or many Japanese companies would also do some foundry. Even HP, I think, did some foundry with their excess capacity.
TI did foundry, Intel did foundry.
With their excess capacity.
With
So
their
they were,
excess capacity.
one strategy was to use excess capacity as a foundry play. And then another company emerged, some competitors emerged where they used JVs as a strategy, where they would go out to the customers and they would form JVs with the customer base. And how did you respond to that? What was the dynamic in the industry at the time? And here all of a sudden you're competing with your customers in a way because they were also in the foundry business. They had JVs and foundries.
Yeah. Well, I never thought that the JV strategy was a good one for either us or our customers. I mean, I think that your example demonstrates that very clearly. The JV concept was that a partner or several partners would co-invest in a fab. Of course, the foundry company is the main investor, but several customers would also invest in the fab. And each customer would have maybe 15-20% share of the fab. And then theoretically, this customer who has invested in 15-20% will enjoy 15-20% of the capacity of the fab. But look at your case. You went from almost nothing to you multiplied. You grew about what, 10 times in 1 year, something like that.
Well, we went from
5 or 6 times anyway.
27 million to today, $5 billion.
No, I'm not talking about today. I'm talking about just 1 year.
About 5 times a year. Yeah,
5 times.
5x, yeah.
5 times a year. So if he had invested in 20% of a fab, if Nvidia had invested in 20% and get only 20% of the fab's capacity, and then in a few months, you have outgrown the capacity you are supposed to get. Then what will happen?
Well, I would be a peaceful CEO running a $37 million company today. I mean, that's
well, of course, you don't have to be limited to that, but I think it's far better for a foundry company, for TSMC, to stay very flexible. We actually, back then, we were plowing all the money, all the profit back into capacity building, capital expenditures. So we were we're increasing our capacity very, very significantly every year. And we were extremely flexible to all the customers. Some customers, frankly, shrank. And some customers, like you, grew rapidly. And we just managed it was difficult. And even now, looking back, I wonder at our skill of managing the total capacity. But the result was that we managed the total capacity in such a way that we satisfied most of our customers. While we not only satisfied most of our customers, we pleased all of our important customers, those that grew very fast. Mm-hmm. We satisfied most of them, and we pleased all of the big growing ones.
Yeah, I think in retrospect, most of the people who looked at the foundry industry thought that technology was important. It is important. That capacity was important, and that is important. But they really missed what was really what ultimately made TSMC extraordinary. And I thought that it was two things. Your recognition right from the beginning that the notion of a JV, the notion of multiple fabs competing against each other was a detriment to growth.
Yeah.
That your strategy of using copy exactly to the best of your ability so that customers could ramp simultaneously in multiple fabs. You know, I don't know how many fabs we run at TSMC these days, but it's got to be many.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Considering the size of our company today, in the course of the last 10 years, I think we've purchased well over $6 billion in wafers. And growing as quickly as we have, you couldn't do that in one fab. You couldn't do that in two fabs.
The next 6 will come faster.
Will come faster.
A lot faster, yeah.
That's right. And maybe later I'll tell everybody what promise TSMC has made to me for my 10th billion dollar purchase. And so the duplicate exactly was a wonderful strategy. The second thing, and probably even more powerful in the end, is this incredible focus on customer service. And I remembered when you called me after your visit, I think it was after my visit, when I got back to the United States, you called me and you said, and it was a phrase that I remembered then and that I've heard, I think, several thousand times since then, was a phrase that you used. You said, "We will jump through hoops for you."
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really admired about that was that it wasn't just what you told me that day. It was a phrase that drove through all of TSMC. Every employee believed in it and lived by it, and people repeated it year over year. How did you do that? How did that start, and how were you able to drive that through the culture?
That is a culture that we just started with it. Well, actually, let me tell you, I was doing foundry work even back in the late 50s at Texas Instruments, although we didn't call it foundry then. Texas Instruments had a transistor, not IC, transistor design from IBM. IBM had developed transistor, designed a transistor, developed a transistor, and ran it on its pilot line, small pilot line. It didn't want to do the production, the volume production, so it gave it to TI to do the production. And I was in charge of one of those lines when I first joined Texas Instruments. And that was really very simply foundry work. And later on, of course, we did more IBM foundry work for IBM. And of course, at TI later on, we did a lot of commodity work, commodity production. And between the two, I enjoyed, between the foundry work, customer work, custom work, and the commodity work, I enjoyed far better the foundry, the custom work. So that was, and I also knew what the secret was, what the key was to custom work, successful custom work. That is satisfying the customer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so jumping through hoops was something that I learned in the late 50s when I was at TI doing foundry work for IBM. So how do we, so in TSMC, we actually tailored everything in the company, the organization, the compensation system, the evaluation system. We tailored everything to customer service, to jumping through hoops. Mm-hmm. And well, I told you an anecdote last night. I was visited by a big IBM company. I mean, this was, more than 10 years ago, and he was very big. and we were still fairly small. We were a couple $1 billion maybe, and he was a lot more than that. His sales was several times that. And he sort of was telling me, he and I had dinner together, and this CEO of this big company, he sort of intimidated me by saying, well, maybe I will go into your business and compete with you. So I let that go for the time being. But several minutes later, I asked him innocently, John, how do you evaluate your fab manager? And he gave me the list. Whoa, he said, yield, cycle time, productivity, and ability to make billings every month, all those things he told me. And after he ran through his list of 10 or 12 factors, he said, what else? He said, don't you evaluate your fab managers the same way? I said, no, John. I evaluate them according to how much complaint I get from customers about their fab. And that's the honest truth. I really did that, have always done that. Mm-hmm. The evaluation of the fab managers. We don't even keep P&L in each fab. Mm. We don't. But we do keep very good track of how satisfied the customers are. And if a fab manager has got a very unsatisfied customer, he is in big trouble. I don't care how much money he makes. He's in big trouble.
Well, Morris, don't be surprised if the number of complaints to your fab managers, steps up dramatically after tomorrow. Especially the ones from me, anyhow. So now that I got it all figured out, all dialed in. And so certainly the customer focus and the jumping through hoops for customers is a core part of culture, and it isn't just a tagline for you. It is really a way of life, and I experience it every day. As I think through your creation of TSMC, you innovated at so many different levels. You started a company that has never existed before of its kind. Very, very large investment in Taiwan, by any standards then and now, and have built it into a global company. But as you think back, even thinking about the culture of Asia, the notion of innovation as a core culture, building something that is a one of a kind, and certainly the first of its kind, is very countercultural. What was your experience in going through that?
Well, it was not easy. I agree that the culture in Asia is usually not just starting something new. I just give you an example. They pride themselves on entrepreneurship, but the entrepreneurship in Asia is usually driven not by a new idea, but by the desire of being your own boss. I give you a very earthly example. I went to a barber shop in my neighborhood, and there were only 2 barbers in that barber shop. And one day, the junior barber told me that he wasn't to stand his boss anymore. He would go out and open a new shop. So he opened a new shop, 3 doors down on the street. And all right, and so he took customers away from like me, to his new shop. and both of them had to work very, very hard. Both of them had to. They both start to discount. Okay? The market is still the same size, you know, and it's not a happy situation anymore. I mean, both of them are very bitter and very resentful to each other, and so I have stopped going to either one. You know? It's not a happy experience anymore. I mean that is entrepreneurship, Asian style. So
how did you convince the venture capitalists, and how did you convince the Taiwan government, and how did you convince employees to, you know, I find that convincing employees to join a startup company is in fact harder than convincing a VC.
Well, back then, of course, the government, they sort of trusted me. Of course, I did have the credentials of my U.S. experience. I was the head of Texas Instruments semiconductor business, and back then, TI had the biggest semiconductor business in the world. So I was a credible credential, I guess. And the government decided that if they were going to if they were going to fund a semiconductor company, I seemed to be a perfectly reasonable candidate to start this company for them. So that part was pretty easy. Now it took some convincing to get Philips to invest, but I did that too. After all, you know, I knew them before I went to Taiwan, and they also knew my track record, and they listened to this foundry pitch, and they thought that it was something very innovative. They weren't sure that it would work, but they were willing to put in some money just to let me try it out, you know. So that part was more difficult than the government's part. And then the rest of the investors, they were very difficult to convince. In fact, I didn't really convince them. I maybe convinced 2 or 3 of them. The rest of them were coerced by the government to invest. No, I had a team of 3 ministers that helped me to get funding, to get investments from them, you know. In fact, one of them was the premier himself. So I remember that the biggest investor who was allocated 5%, he was told to invest 5%. And he invited me to dinner 3 times. And each time I went with an assistant of mine, 2 of us, and we were surrounded at the dinner table by 10 of his staff. And they grilled me and my assistant on the details. They knew nothing about semiconductors, nothing at all. But they grilled us on financial issues, and they grilled us on, you know, general issues like how do you think you're going to compete with American companies, Japanese companies, even Korean companies? They are way ahead of you. How do you compete with them? My answer to them was, no, we don't compete with them. We're in the foundry business. Those other companies are not in the foundry business. They may do some foundry work just to fill their fab, but they are not our competitors. We are going to start a new business, and that, of course, made them even worry more, you know, even worry more. So anyway, but I did make 2 friends, I think. I didn't know them before I made the pitch for the investment, but after I made the pitch, they told third parties that my presentation was the best they had ever heard about the investment. I made 2 friends, but the rest of them were coerced by the government. The premier told me that the biggest investor, 5% investor, wanted to back down to 2% or 3%, and the premier had to call him and said, "Gee, Mr. So-and-so, you know, it's government policy here that we want to start the semiconductor company. Aren't you going to support government policy?" So that was what happened. Yeah.
So when I was an entrepreneur, I was 30 years old, and I had a well, at the time PowerPoint didn't exist, so I used Persuasion, which was on the Macintosh, and I don't think my Persuasion was that good either. If it wasn't because of Wilf Corrigan, who's sitting out in the audience making a few phone calls on my behalf, I don't know what I would be doing right now. But how did you tell the TSMC story? Did you have a pitch, or did you just hand them the brochure on the core values?
Oh no. Oh,
I'm not saying that it wasn't convincing.
I spoke eloquently for at least 30 minutes. I did have a presentation. It wasn't PowerPoint at that time. It was foils. Foils, yeah. But I did have a foil presentation, and I rehearsed it myself, and I prepared very carefully. And as I said, I spoke eloquently for 30 minutes, and I answered all the questions. Mm-hmm.
And so you know, people say that it's quite rare, and I think statistically it is quite rare that founders that found the company end up building the company, run it operationally, turn it into a multi-billion-dollar company, take it public, grow it even further than that, and in your case, even one step beyond that, having groomed a successor, and the company continues to do fabulously. You know, how do you attribute to I guess maybe answering the question in 2 different ways? Why do you think there's so few people who do that? And how do you attribute to your ability to do that?
Well, I think most people who found companies really haven't had experience running a big operation. I did, however. I was an operating executive before I founded a company. In fact, I had something like 30,000 employees working under me at Texas Instruments. So I was an operating executive before I founded a company. And then, of course, I founded a TSMC, and TSMC started with 150 employees. It took a long time before the employees I had in TSMC equaled the number of employees I had at TI, you know. And I enjoyed the operating management work. So when I had the chance at TSMC to become a big operating executive again, I enjoyed it.
But
I mean, a lot of people
usually, operating executives have a hard time thinking small. You know, operating executives they're wonderful at running a machine, optimizing a machine, tweaking it, getting a lot of yield out of it, getting a lot of return out of it. But they have a hard time thinking small. How did you get yourself to think small again? To think $0 billion again?
I don't think I had to think very small. I don't. Well, I guess right after we started TSMC, I hired the president of TSMC. I was the chairman, and so I hired the president, and he immediately hired the U.S. sales manager, and so it was a fairly well-structured organization, even at the beginning. And then on the operational side, of course, we had this group that was spun off from ITRI, as you already mentioned, and they were very familiar with the details of the manufacturing line. So I I guess I really never had to worry about every little detail on a production line. Now, we started 150 people, but most of them were pretty key people, you know, managerial types.
Now, running a very large operation versus building a company is, as you know now, very, very different.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, how would you describe, you know, how you have evolved yourself along the ways from 1987 to now?
Well, I think that mentally you have to adjust yourself to the changing status of the company. For instance, when TSMC first started, in the first few years, of course, the growth wasn't very high because we were waiting for our customers to emerge. The customers were the fabless companies. So the first few companies we were taking business, were getting business from the big IDMs. Intel, TI, Motorola were all our customers back in the first few years, and they were very important to us. They taught us how to control quality and a lot of things. They were very important to us. But they were not the customers that eventually turned out to be our most important customers. Our most important customers, the ones that were ultimately important, were still being born at that time, the first few years. And then in the 90s, we went through a rapid expansion phase. Almost the entire decade of the 90s, we were growing at, you know, I didn't keep track of the exact number, but it must have been over 50% a year, average, all through the 90s. So you had a mental attitude for that kind of growth. And then 2000, 2001, you know, the internet bubble bursted, and the semiconductor industry as a whole plunged 30% in 1 year, from 2000 to 2001.
Did you lose money that year?
Huh?
Did you lose money that year? The TSMC?
No, we did not lose money that year, but our growth slowed down. And in fact, our growth, well, we had negative growth in 2001 also. We plunged 25%, I think, not the 30% of the industry. But since then, our growth has slowed down to average of 15-20% now, rather than the 50%. So I had to adjust my attitude, you know. And if you can adjust your attitude to the different periods of a company's life, a company usually goes through a successful company, usually goes through a rapid expansion, and then a period of consolidation, and then maturity. Say, if you can adjust yourself to these different periods of companies' life cycle, and also bring a different skill set to cope with each period, then I think you're a happy man. Then you're a happy man. I think some people, some very smart people, they can only get used to very rapid growth, and as soon as growth slows down, well, they will say, this is not my cup of tea anymore. I want to start something new. I want to start something from zero again, so I will experience rapid growth again, you know. I maybe, unfortunately, am not that type of people. I'm quite happy with what I've got. I saw it growing very rapidly, and I saw it now maturing. But it's still good business, you know. I consider everything higher than the world average economic GDP growth as good business. The world average economic GDP growth is only about 4%. U.S. is less than 3% average.
Well, Morris, as soon as I have what you have, I'm going to be happy with what I have. Did that come out right? And so part of building TSMC, you know, the now bringing it to the current era, the succession to Rick Tsai. Tell me about that. Tell me about the process that you went through to both groom future CEOs, and ultimately what were the characteristics that you looked for to select ultimately Rick in that process?
Well, the short answer to your question is that you can groom somebody on some of the skills that he needs as a successful CEO, but
my e-staff's in the audience, just so you know. My staff is in the audience.
Yeah. But the more important ones, he really has to acquire himself. Usually, if you groom someone inside the company, you pick someone that has executed well. That's usually how a person, a manager, gets promoted within an organization. He is usually a very successful executor.
And Rick started out in the ranks of running fabs, right? He was one of the fab managers.
He is an excellent executor. So, all right. So what did I do? He was an operations man. He was basically a technical person, engineering type. And when he came to TSMC, he was at first a deputy fab manager, and then he became fab manager, and he became a group fab manager in charge of a group of fabs and so on. And then he became operation VP. And then at that point, I decided that he would be a candidate for my job. So I put him in sales marketing. And I also put him in as the president of a subsidiary of ours. The subsidiary is Vanguard, and it's also a foundry, and put him there.
That's right. You had him run Vanguard for a while.
Yeah, I had him run Vanguard for a couple of years. He was president of Vanguard. And then he came back to TSMC, and I put him in as marketing and sales executive VP. So he had both operations and the marketing and sales. Mm-hmm. Those were the two major functions in TSMC anyway, operations and marketing.
And so that was the process that you went through to groom Rick to be CEO.
Yeah.
But you know, you're methodical in just about in everything I know that you do, and you break every problem down into its fundamental pieces. And so in the case of ultimately selecting Rick to be CEO, I know that it must have been extraordinarily thoughtful. And you know, this is a company that you've built, so it's also personal. And you know, what were the criteria that you ultimately went through to select Rick? That you are ready for the job.
Criteria, I think first of all, his adherence to the values. I mean, I still come back to values. I think those are the important, very important. And then his skill set, and because of the exposure he already had to the two major functions that we have, operations and the sales. I think he already acquired a very complete skill set. And then you look at a person's imagination, and really, when you come right down to it, how smart he is. I mean, I certainly, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I think, become successful when they are not very smart, maybe, but I don't believe in that. I wouldn't. I think that Rick is a very, very smart person.
Yeah, well, I think that the selection of Rick has been fabulous, and
Yeah.
and he certainly lives by the core values of the company.
Yeah.
Lives and breathes by it, and,
Yeah.
and certainly intellectual capacity is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So now as you think going forward, you know, the TSMC is now the largest foundry in the world, is the second most valuable semiconductor company in the world. As you look forward for Rick, what are the challenges that you think are ahead of him?
Oh, just enormous, I think. Yeah. Well, first of all, you know, just this thing.
Good time to pass it off.
You can't stand still. You can't stand still. I think this business is still like a treadmill that speeds up all the time. Mm-hmm. And if you can't keep up, you fall off the treadmill. Mm-hmm. It's a treadmill that speeds up all the time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you will fall off the treadmill if you can't keep up. And that's Moore's law also, by the way. Moore's law is just a relentless taskmaster.
Well, one of the challenges that Rick and I both have, and this is and applies to all of the semiconductor companies in the world today. You know, Moore's law is a enabling force, but is also a depreciating force. Mm-hmm. You know, on the one hand, its advancement makes possible amazing new devices and new technologies, but on the other hand, because of its compression and its integration, it makes valuable products cheaper and cheaper every day. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I think there are few forces in the world that are of this nature, and few industries of this nature.
That's true.
Yeah. How do you think this plays out?
Well, that's why you have to keep up on the speeding treadmill. If you fall off, you have become depreciated. Well, seriously, you know, people who have lived with Moore's law for a long time usually have mixed feelings about it. Just as you said, yeah. They have mixed feelings mainly because Moore's law is a relentless taskmaster. But you know, the best people, and the best people change from time to time. The best people are able to live with it and use it to advantage. Yeah, sure, the chips become cheaper and cheaper and so on, but still, we intend to make money. Mm-hmm. I mean, no matter how cheap the chips get, and you intend to make money too.
God, I hope so.
Yeah, so it's part of the game.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I think that so I would like to invite all of you guys to be part of our conversation. You know, everything that Morris has spoken about so far is profound and thoughtful. You know, why don't you guys also join us in the conversation? What can Morris answer for you guys? And if you could just introduce yourself, that'd be great. Hi, Nathan.
World when they said they were going to get out of the process development aspect of the job of the industry and work with TSMC on new advanced technologies. As somebody who has a long time in TI as well as a long time in TSMC, what do you think this means for the U.S. semiconductor industry when TI, who is really one of the great powers in the industry, no longer feels like they can keep up by themselves?
Well, I really think that the U.S. should not worry too much about wafer fabs being in other countries. It's a globalized world now, and assembly, for instance, have long moved offshore. Wafer fabs, of course, are not quite the same as assembly. There's more technology, and there's also defense technology involved. So I'm completely in favor of keeping enough wafer fabs in the United States to at least satisfy our defensive requirements. But as far as the commercial requirements are concerned, I wouldn't worry too much about the wafer fabs moving offshore.
I wasn't speaking so much about the production capacity as I was the innovation aspects of it. You know, we always pride ourselves here in the U.S. as being very innovative, and yet TI is saying, hey, we can't keep up with the innovation anymore.
Yeah, but still have Intel. Yeah. And Intel is, I think, doing a pretty smart thing. Intel is going to set up a fab in China also. And I think that they are not just going to use the Chinese fab as a production vehicle. They are also going to use the talents in China to further advance their innovations here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Good evening, Mike Berzoni with Camp Marketing. First, two questions. The first is, as process saturates, are we going to see Samsung and Intel in the foundry business? The second question is, how is TSMC going to take your ADRs and move those net margins from the depository receipts closer to the company's historic margins?
I'm sorry, my hearing wasn't very good. Did you hear
The first question, did you hear the first question?
No, I didn't.
The first question was, let me see if I could paraphrase it. You know, as the semiconductor technology, you said saturates. I feel that you mean as it gets more and more dense. I don't know that it stops.
Right, exactly. Saturation at infinity. When Intel owns the majority of the production volume, are they going to enter the foundry business?
So his question is basically, as technology advances and maybe Intel has more capacity than they need for the 300 or 400 or 500 million PCs a year that they build, or CPUs that they build, would they use the excess capacity to go into the foundry business? And the same question applies to Samsung. And I think his question is your perspective on Intel and Samsung going into the foundry business.
It's a completely different corporate culture. Foundry requires a completely different culture. As I said earlier, I was telling the anecdote about my conversation with this IBM CEO, and Jensen didn't let me finish my anecdote. He interrupted. Anyway,
see how he remembers these things?
I mean, he told me that he evaluated his plant managers by such parameters, such conventional parameters as cycle time, yield cost, and so on. And I said that we evaluate our plant managers by the satisfaction, by customer satisfaction. That shows how different the corporate culture is. And actually, what I didn't finish when Jensen interrupted was I decided right then and there that this guy is not going to be an effective competitor with me, even if he enters the foundry business. And I give you the same comment when you bring up Samsung and Intel. I have a great deal of respect for them in what they are doing. But I do not think that they will effectively compete with me in the foundry business, even if they have excess capacity.
You know, as you look at it from the customer's perspective, and certainly we've purchased a lot and worked a lot with TSMC over the years. You know, from our perspective, there's a very, very important difference between a semiconductor company of force versus a semiconductor company of agility and force. And I think agility is something that is tough to teach large corporations, especially when their business model is really about, you know, large, common types of products, you know, built with great force.
Their field effects are set.
So it's just a different business, different culture, different business model.
Different culture, and keep in mind, I emphasize the customer service, the customer satisfaction aspect of the foundry business. But it's more than that. To give you another example, the ability for us to deal with almost 50 different customers in the same fab. That is an ability that no other semiconductor company has. And we just learned it, you know, over 20 years. That's one of our trade secrets too, if you will.
I'll simplify the second question, but it still deals with that small fortune of depository receipts. How are they going to be used, and can TSMC grow 4 times in the next 15 years?
How can we grow 4 times in the next 15 years? We probably won't grow 4 times in the next 15 years. It takes, let's see, it takes 15%, I think, to grow 4 times in 15 years, doesn't it?
A little better, I think.
10% to grow 4 times in the next, that we can do. 10%. 10% we can do. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to say, Morris, speak for yourself.
I peg our growth rate, at least my objective growth rate, is somewhere between 10 and 15%, average compounded annual. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's fabulous.
That's
something else. Yeah. That is something else. Go ahead.
My name is Bob Liu. I work for a company named Lam Research, which is a supplier for TSMC. TSMC is a big customer for us. We do quite a few $100 million.
I know Lam Research very well.
So my question is, how do you leverage your suppliers' capability in terms of delivering capacity and innovation to your customers and other values?
We treat them as partners too. Our philosophy is partners upstream and downstream. Customers are partners, and suppliers are our partners also, until they prove otherwise.
We're very lucky. We are still one of your major customers in equipment. We were kicked out by one of our major customers before, Intel, right? That's not a secret. So we're still doing very well. My second question, also last question, is what kind of criteria do you use to evaluate your supplier to decide, hey, which one you want to go with?
Well, I don't think we really have a formal mechanism of evaluating our suppliers. You know, it's just we treat them as partners until they prove otherwise, as I said. I'm not aware of any formal evaluation mechanism. Just as we don't evaluate our customers either. I hope not.
And that's something you don't need to start. And so, Morris, looking back 20 years now, $60 billion of value ago. Now that TSMC is such a great company, most people probably don't even remember anymore, but was there a time in TSMC's history that you thought the viability of the company was going to be threatened?
Oh, yes. Just for instance, in '97, our president and our CFO both left, which by itself was already, two key people leaving in 1 year, I think was already bad enough, but they both went to our competition, and so I think to us that was a crisis here, and we knew that the competitors' objective was to try to take our mainly American business from us. So for at least 6 months, I was following our ex-president's footsteps when we knew that he had visited a customer to try to take business away from us to for the new company that he joined. I followed his footsteps to try to neutralize his effect. And 98 came, and we were quite happy that we kept almost 100% of our business. I would say 100% of our business. Mm-hmm. And both of them, both the president and the CFO, very quickly left their new company also. Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly TSMC is in the business that you're in. It's a people business.
Oh, yeah.
So it's so that must have been a great threat.
Yeah.
Well, lucky for you, they didn't return my phone calls either. Mm-hmm. And for a moment there, when you said 1997, I thought the event that caused you to question your viability was when you met me. So I'm glad to.
You were a great help. You were a great help in that year, '97, because
Now, when you look back on the history of TSMC, what are some of the events that gave you just great pride, that you felt, not just the achievement, but the character of the company gave you great pride? And as company builders, we look back and it's not just the products, but it's certain events.
I do want to single out one event. That was the earthquake in Taiwan. Mm-hmm. It happened in '99, and it shut us down completely because we lost power. Mm-hmm. All our fabs.
I remember that.
Yeah, lost power. And in fact, did you know that the NASDAQ index actually dropped? Not because of us alone, but because Taiwan. Mm-hmm. Taiwan was a very key factor mm-hmm. in the supply chain, mm-hmm. the PC supply chain and electronic supply chain in general. And because of the earthquake, a lot of companies were shut down, and we were shut down, and so NASDAQ dropped for a few days until we picked ourselves up and recovered. I remember the night the earthquake happened at about 2 o'clock in the morning of September 21st, 1999. 2 o'clock in the morning, I was jolted awake by the earthquake. And it was really very serious. I thought it was the end of the world, frankly. I mean, it shook so much. I mean, I lived on the 12th floor, and the building shook so much that I really thought it was the end of the world, the end of me anyway. Yeah. But then it subsided, and I was glad I was still alive, although most of the the TV sets had tumbled to the floor, and a lot of the bookshelves and so on had fallen to the floor, and the whole apartment was like a war zone, you know. But I got a call from I got 2 calls actually. One from FC, who was the president at that time, and the other from Rick Tsai, who was, I think, the operational executive VP. And they first asked me how I was, whether I was okay. I lived alone at that time. This was before I got married. And I said I was okay. So next thing they said, well, I'm going to the fab to see how things are. And well, they were not the only people, because it was 2 o'clock in the morning, remember. By about 4 o'clock, the parking lot was full. All the engineers, the managers, manufacturing managers, they all came back to the fab to see what the damage was. And so immediately we started to recover. But for 2 days, we didn't have any power. And then on the 3rd day, on day 3, power came back. And I think we started operations again on day 4. And by day 10, we were already up to the same productivity as we had before the earthquake. So that was a very rapid recovery.
Yeah, that was...
And it also, I was really moved to tears by the spirit of the employees, the managers.
That's a great story. I remember it on our side, and we were all on pins and needles because, you know, all of us, we have our business to run, and we you know, at the time Nvidia was rather small, and we had our quarter to make, and yet you guys you really didn't miss a beat.
No, we didn't miss very much at all. We maybe missed we were at the end 5 or 6 days late, you know, net. But that was all.
That's really terrific. Yeah. Well, does anybody else have? I have one last question, and what I wanted to do was give you guys an opportunity to ask a couple more if you have it, and then I'd like to ask one last question of Morris. Okay, go ahead. Why don't you walk up and take the last one?
Hi, Dr. Chen. I'm Mike Chen. Correct me if I'm wrong, but then I remember you published your autobiography back in 1998. And I have read it many times, and it was a great inspiration to me. And just wondering, now you have passed the torch to Dr. Rick Tsai. When is the second part coming out?
Well, I can't promise you any date, you know, but I do plan to write it, but I don't know when. I haven't got around to doing it yet.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, hopefully this book is going to be about your body of work, which I think is absolutely extraordinary, and it's a great privilege for all of us to have a conversation with you again tonight, Morris. As a last question, you know, there's so many things you could hope for, but what do you hope and aspire for TSMC long into the future? What are your hopes and aspirations?
Oh, I just certainly hope that it will keep its values. That's important, very important, most important. But then I also hope that it continues to grow, you know, at a rate that's between 10 and 15% for the next 15 years. Yeah, right.
Well, Well, I have every confidence that's going to happen. Well, Morris, it was a fabulous having a conversation with you, as always. And you know, a lot of people see the serious side of you, and I've had the privilege over the years to know what a great sense of humor you have, and how much you enjoy young people and learning about their ideas. And so just with one parting thought, I'm going to make fun of Morris, and this is I don't think he's ever heard this story, and I don't think, Sophie, you've heard this story before. So the first time Morris came over to our house, and we're there having dinner, and I had just made some barbecue, and we're sitting at the kitchen table, if you remember, and you were telling wonderful stories of your life to the kids, and you were funny, and you were really patient, and you were telling your stories, and at some point you started asking the kids questions, and Spencer was telling you something, and you were asking him, I forget exactly what the question was, but he was explaining it to you, and you were cutting your steak, and you stopped cutting for a moment, and Spencer said, I think Mr. Chang fell asleep. And you know, and Morris, I don't know if you remember this or not. You said, I'm listening to you.
What did I say? What did I say?
You said, I am listening to you.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, you guys, you know, I'm glad that you guys also got to see the funny side of Morris that really endears him to me, and I want to congratulate you on your recognition last night. It is a reflection of the contribution you've made to the world and certainly to our industry. Without the work that you've done and TSMC have done, the rest of us wouldn't be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let me say, Jensen. Jensen and Morris, let me thank you both. It's very special when you can think about history. It's even more special when you see friends talking to us about history. Thank you so much. And we have a small token of appreciation for you both today.
Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.